Hattie McDaniel, June 10, 1895 – October 26, 1952, was an American actress, singer-songwriter, and comedienne. She is best known for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, 1939, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, making her the first African-American to win an Academy Award. In addition to acting in many films, McDaniel was a professional singer-songwriter, comedian, stage actress, radio performer, and television star. She was the first black woman to sing on the radio in the U.S. During her career, McDaniel appeared in over 300 films, although she received screen credits for only 80 or so. McDaniel has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Hollywood, one at 6933 Hollywood Boulevard for her contributions to radio and one at 1719 Vine Street for acting in motion pictures. In 1975, she was inducted into the Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame and in 2006 became the first black Oscar winner honored with a U.S. postage stamp. Background and early acting career. Hattie McDaniel was born June 10, 1895, in Wichita, Kansas, to former slaves. She was the youngest of 13 children. Her father, Henry McDaniel, fought in the Civil War with the 122nd U.S.A, and her mother, Susan Holbert, was a singer of religious music. In 1900, the family moved to Colorado, living first in Fort Collins and then in Denver, where Hattie graduated from Denver East High School. Her brother, Sam McDaniel, 1886 to 1962, played the butler in the 1948 Three Stooges short film Heavenly Daze. Another acting sibling of Hattie and Sam was actor Etta McDaniel. In addition to performing, Hattie was also a songwriter, a skill she honed while working with her brother's minstrel show. After the death of her brother Otis in 1916, the troupe began to lose money, and it wasn't until 1920 that Hattie got her next big break. During 1920-25, she appeared with Professor George Morrison's Melody Hounds, a touring black ensemble, and in the mid-1920s she embarked on a radio career, singing with the Melody Hounds on station KOA in Denver. In 1926-1929 she also recorded many of her songs on OK Records and Paramount Records in Chicago. In all, McDaniel recorded 7 sessions, one in the summer of 1926 on the rare Kansas City label Merit, 4 sessions in Chicago for OK. Late 1926 late 1927, of the 10 sides, only 4 were issued, and 2 sessions in Chicago for Paramount, both in March 1929. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the only work McDaniel could find was as a washroom attendant and waitress at Club Madrid in Milwaukee. Despite the owner's reluctance to let her perform, McDaniel was eventually allowed to take the stage and she soon became a regular. In 1931, McDaniel made her way to Los Angeles to join her brother Sam and sisters Etta and Orlina. When she could not get film work, she took jobs as a maid or cook. Sam was working on KNX radio program called The Optimistic Do-Nut Hour, and he was able to get his sister a spot. She appeared on radio as Hi-Hat Hattie, a bossy maid who often forgets her place. Her show became extremely popular, but her salary was so low that she had to continue working as a maid. Her first film appearance was in The Golden West, 1932, as a maid. Her second was in the highly successful Mae West film I'm No Angel, 1933, as one of the black maids West camped it up with backstage. She received several other uncredited film roles in the early 1930s, often singing in choruses. In 1934, McDaniel joined the Screen Actors Guild, SAG. She began to attract attention and finally landed larger film roles that began to win her screen credits. Fox Film Corporation put her under contract to appear in The Little Colonel, 1935, with Shirley Temple, Bill Bojangles Robinson and Lionel Barrymore. Judge Priest, 1934, directed by John Ford and starring Will Rogers, was the first film in which she played a major role. She had a leading part in the film and demonstrated her singing talent, including a duet with Rogers. McDaniel and Rogers became friends during filming. In 1935 McDaniel had prominent roles with her performances as a slovenly maid in RKO Pictures' Alice Adams, a comic part as John Harlow's maid, traveling companion in MGM's China Seas, the latter her first film with Clark Gable, and as Isabella the maid in Murder by Television with B.E. Acute L.A. Lugosi. She also appeared in the 1938 film, Vivacious Lady, starring James Stewart and Ginger Rogers. McDaniel had a featured role as Queenie in Universal Pictures' 1936 version of Showboat, starring Alan Jones, and Irene Dunn, and sang a verse of Can't Help Lovin', Dat Man with Dunn. Helen Morgan, Paul Robeson, and the Black Chorus. Later in the film she and Robeson sang I Still Suits Me, a song written especially by Kern and Hammerstein for the film. After Showboat she had major roles in MGM's Saratoga, 1937, starring Jean Harlow and Clark Gable, The Shopworn Angel, 1938, with Margaret Sullivan, and The Mad Miss Manton, 1938, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Henry Fonda. She had a very minor role in the Carole Lombard, Frederick March vehicle, Nothing Sacred, 1937, in which she appeared as the wife of a shoeshine man, Troy Brown, masquerading as a sultan. McDaniel was a friend of many of Hollywood's most popular stars, including Joan Crawford, Tallulah Bankhead, Bette Davis, Shirley Temple, Henry Fonda, Ronald Reagan, Olivia de Havilland, and Clark Gable. She would star with de Havilland and Gable in Gone with the Wind, 1939. It was around this time that she began to be criticized by members of the black community for the roles she chose to accept and for her decision to pursue roles aggressively rather than rock the Hollywood boat. For example, in The Little Colonel, 1935, she played one of the black servants longing to return to the Old South, but McDaniel's portrayal of Malina in RKO Pictures as Alice Adams angered white Southern audiences. She had stolen several scenes away from the film's white star, Katharine Hepburn. McDaniel would ultimately become best known for playing a sassy and opinionated maid. Gone with the Wind. The competition to play Mammy in Gone with the Wind, 1939, had been almost as stiff as that for Scarlett O'Hara. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote to film producer David O. Selznick to ask that her own maid, Elizabeth McDuffie, be given the part. McDaniel did not think she would be chosen because she had earned her reputation as a comic actress. One source claims that Clark Gable recommended the role go to McDaniel. In any case, she went to her audition dressed in an authentic maid's uniform and won the part. Upon hearing of the planned film adaptation, the NAACP fought hard to require the film's producer and director to delete racial epithets from it, in particular the offensive slur nigger, and to alter scenes that might be incendiary and that, in their view, were historically inaccurate. Of particular concern was a scene from the novel in which black men attack Scarlett O'Hara, after which the Ku Klux Klan, with its long history of provoking terror on black communities, is presented as a savior. Throughout the South, black men were being lynched based upon false allegations they had harmed white women. That attack scene was altered, and some offensive language was modified, but another epithet, darky, remained in the film, and the film's message with respect to slavery remained essentially the same. Consistent with the book, the film's screenplay also referred to poor whites as white trash, and it ascribed these words equally to characters black and white. The Loews Grand Theater on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia, was selected by the studio as the site for the premiere of Gone with the Wind, Friday, December 15, 1939. As the date of the premiere approached, all the black actors were advised they were barred from attending, excluded from being in the souvenir program, and banned from appearing in advertisements for the film in the South. Studio head David Selznick asked that Hattie McDaniel be permitted to attend, but MGM advised him not to because of Georgia's segregation laws. Clark Gable threatened to boycott the Atlanta premiere unless McDaniel was allowed to attend, but McDaniel convinced him to attend anyway. Most of Atlanta's 300,000 citizens crowded the route of the 7-mile motorcade that carried the film's other stars and executives from the airport to the Georgian Terrace Hotel, where they stayed. While Jim Crow laws kept McDaniel from the Atlanta premiere, she did attend the film's Hollywood debut on December 28, 1939. Upon Selznick's insistence, her picture was also featured prominently in the program. It was McDaniel's role as the house slave who repeatedly scolds her owner's daughter, Scarlett O'Hara, Vivian Leigh, and scoffs at Rhett Butler, Clark Gable, that won McDaniel the 1939 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, making her the first black American to win an Oscar. She had also been the first black American to be nominated. I loved Mammy, McDaniel said when speaking to the white press about the character. I think I understood her because my own grandmother worked on a plantation not unlike Tara. Her role in Gone with the Wind had alarmed some whites in the Southern audience. There were complaints that in the film she had been too familiar with her white owners, but at least one author pointed out that McDaniel's character does not significantly depart from Mammy's persona in Margaret Mitchell's book, and that in both the film and the book the much younger Scarlett speaks to Mammy in ways that would be deemed inappropriate for a Southern teen of that era to speak to a much older white person, and that neither the book nor the film hint of the existence of Mammy's own children, dead or alive, her own family, dead or alive, a real name, or her desires to have anything other than a life at Tara, serving on a slave plantation. Moreover, while Mammy scolds the younger Scarlett, Mammy never crosses the more senior white woman in the household, Mrs. O'Hara. Some critics felt that McDaniel not only accepted the roles but in her press comments acquiesced in Hollywood's stereotypes. providing fuel for critics of those who were fighting for black civil rights. Later, when McDaniel tried to take her Mammy character on a road show, black audiences did not prove receptive. While many blacks were happy over McDaniel's personal victory, they also viewed it as bittersweet. They believed Gone with the Wind celebrated the slave system and condemned the forces that destroyed it. For them, the unique accolade McDaniel had won suggested that only those who did not protest Hollywood's systemic use of racial stereotypes could find work and success there. 1940 Academy Awards. The 12th Academy Awards took place at the Coconut Grove restaurant of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. It was preceded by a banquet in the same room. Luella Parsons, an American gossip columnist, wrote about Oscar night, February 29, 1940. Hattie McDaniel earned that gold Oscar by her fine performance of Mammy in Gone with the Wind. If you had seen her face when she walked up to the platform and took the gold trophy, you would have had the choke in your voice that all of us had when Hattie, hair trimmed with gardenias, face alight, and dress up to the Queen's taste, accepted the honor in one of the finest speeches ever given on the Academy floor. McDaniel received a plaque-style Oscar, approximately 5.5 x 6 inches, the type awarded to all Best Supporting Actors and Actresses at that time. McDaniel and her escort were required to sit at a segregated table for two. Gone with the Wind was awarded 10 Academy Awards, a record that stood for years, and was later named by the American Film Institute, AFI, as number 4 among the top 100 American films of all time. Later career. In the 1942 Warner Brothers film In This Our Life, starring Bette Davis and directed by John Huston, McDaniel once again played a domestic, but one who confronts racial issues, as her law student son is wrongly accused of manslaughter. The following year, McDaniel was in Warner Bros. Thank You're Lucky stars with Humphrey Bogart and Bette Davis. In its review of the film, Time wrote that McDaniel was comic relief in an otherwise grim study, writing, Hattie McDaniel, whose bubbling, blaring good humor more than redeems the roaring bad taste of a Harlem number called Ice Cold Katie. Hattie McDaniel continued to play maids during the war years in Warner Bros. The Male Animal, 1942, and United Artists Since You Went Away, 1944, but her feistiness was toned down to reflect the era's somber news. She also played the maid in Song of the South. She made her last film appearances in Mickey, 1948, and Family Honeymoon, 1949. She remained active on radio and television in her final years, becoming the first black American to star in her own radio show with the comedy series Beulah. She also starred in the ABC television version of the show, replacing Ethel Waters after the first season. Waters had apparently expressed concerns over stereotypes in the role. Beulah was a hit, however, and earned McDaniel $2,000 a week, but the show was controversial. In 1951, the United States Army ceased broadcasting the Beulah show in Asia because troops complained that the show perpetuated negative stereotypes of black men as shiftless and lazy and interfered with the ability of black troops to perform their mission. After filming a handful of episodes, however, McDaniel learned she had breast cancer. By the spring of 1952, she was too ill to work and was replaced by Louise Beavers. Legal case, Victory on Sugar Hill. McDaniel was the most famous of the black homeowners who helped to organize the black West Adams neighborhood residents who saved their homes. Lauren Miller, a local attorney and owner, publisher of the California Eagle newspaper, represented the minority homeowners in their restrictive covenant case. In 1944, Miller won the case Fairchild v. Rainers, a decision for a black Pasadena, California, family that had bought a non-restricted lot but was sued by white neighbors anyway. Time magazine reported, in its December 17, 1945 issue that, spacious, well-kept West Adams Heights still had the complacent look of the days when most of Los Angeles' aristocracy lived there. In 1938, Negroes, willing and able to pay $15,000 and up for Heights property, had begun moving into the old eclectic mansions. Many were movie folk, actresses Louise Beavers, Hattie McDaniel, Ethel Waters, etc. They improved their holdings, kept their well-defined ways, quickly won more than tolerance from most of their white neighbors. But some whites, refusing to be comforted, had referred to the original racial restriction covenant that came with the development of West Adams Heights back in 1902, which restricted non-Caucasians from owning property. For 7 years they had tried to enforce it, but failed. Then they went to court. Superior Judge Thurmond Clark decided to visit the disputed ground, popularly known as Sugar Hill. Next morning, Judge Clark threw the case out of court. His reason, it is time that members of the Negro race are accorded, without reservations or evasions, the full rights guaranteed them under the 14th Amendment to the federal Constitution. Judges have been avoiding the real issue too long, said Hattie McDaniel, of West Adams Heights. Words cannot express my appreciation. McDaniel had purchased her white two-story, 17-room house in 1942. The house included a large living room, dining room, drawing room, den, butler's pantry, kitchen, service porch, library, 4 bedrooms and a basement. McDaniel had a yearly Hollywood party. Everyone knew that the king of Hollywood, Clark Gable, could always be found at McDaniel's parties. Controversy over roles. As her fame grew, McDaniel faced growing criticism from some members of the black community. Groups such as the NAACP complained that Hollywood stereotypes not only restricted blacks to servant roles but often portrayed blacks as lazy, dim-witted, perfectly satisfied in lowly positions, or violent. In addition to addressing studios, they called upon actors, and especially leading black actors, to pressure studios to offer more substantive roles and at least not pander to stereotypes. They also argued that these portrayals were unfair as well as inaccurate and that, coupled with segregation and other forms of discrimination, such stereotypes were making it difficult for all blacks, not only actors, to overcome racism and succeed. Some attacked McDaniel for being an Uncle Tom, a person willing to advance personally by perpetuating racial stereotypes or being an agreeable agent of offensive racial restrictions. McDaniel characterized these challenges as class-based biases against domestics, a claim that white columnists seemed to accept, and she reportedly said, "Why should I complain about making $700 a week playing a maid? If I didn't, I'd be making $7 a week being one." McDaniel may also have been criticized because, unlike many other black entertainers, she was not associated with civil rights protests and was largely absent from efforts to establish a commercial base for independent black films. She did not join the Negro Actors Guild of America until 1947, very late in her career. McDaniel hired one of the few white agents who would represent black actors in those days, William Meiklejohn, to advance her career. Evidence suggests her avoidance of political controversy was premeditated. When columnist Hedda Hopper sent her Richard Nixon placards and asked McDaniel to distribute them, McDaniel declined, replying she had long ago decided to stay out of politics. "Beulah is everybody's friend," she said. Since she was earning a living honestly, she added, she should not be criticized for accepting such work as was offered. Her critics, especially Walter White of the NAACP, claimed that she and other actors who agreed to portray stereotypes were not a neutral force but rather willing agents of black oppression. McDaniel and other black actors feared that their roles would evaporate if the NAACP and other Hollywood critics complained too loudly. She blamed these critics for hindering her career and sought the help of allies of doubtful reputation. After speaking with McDaniel, Hedda Hopper even claimed that McDaniel's career troubles were not the result of racism but had been caused by McDaniel's own people. Community service. McDaniel was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority, one of 4 African-American Greek letter sororities in the United States. During World War II, she served as chairman of the Negro Division of the Hollywood Victory Committee, providing entertainment for soldiers stationed at military bases. The military was segregated, and black entertainers were not allowed to serve on white entertainment committees. She elicited the help of her friend, actor Lee Whipper, and other black entertainers for her committee. She also made numerous personal appearances at military hospitals, threw parties, and performed at United Service Organizations (USO) shows and war bond rallies to raise funds to support the war on behalf of the Victory Committee. Bette Davis was the only white member of McDaniel's acting troupe to perform for black regiments. Lena Horne and Ethel Waters also participated. In addition, McDaniel was a member of American Women's Voluntary Services. She joined actor Clarence Muse, one of the first black members of the Screen Actors Guild, in an NBC radio broadcast to raise funds for Red Cross relief programs for Americans that had been displaced by devastating floods and gained a reputation for generosity, lending money to friends and strangers alike. Marriages. McDaniel's first husband, George Langford, died in 1922, soon after she married him and while her career was on the rise, and her father died the same year. She married Howard Hickman in 1938 but divorced him later in that year. In 1941, she married James Lloyd Crawford, a real estate salesman. According to the book, Bright Boulevards, Bold Dreams by Donald Bogle, McDaniel happily confided to gossip columnist Hedda Hopper in 1945 that she was pregnant. McDaniel began buying baby clothes and set up a nursery in her house. Her plans were shattered when she suffered a false pregnancy, and McDaniel fell into a depression. She never had any children and divorced Crawford in 1945 after 4.5 years of marriage. Crawford had been jealous of her career success, she said, and once threatened to kill her. On June 11, 1949, in Yuma, Arizona, she married Larry Williams, an interior decorator, but divorced him in 1950 after testifying that their 5 months together had been marred by arguing and fussing. McDaniel broke down in tears when she testified that her husband tried to provoke dissension in the cast of her radio show and otherwise interfered with her her work. I haven't gotten over it yet, she said. I got so I couldn't sleep. I couldn't concentrate on my lines. Death. McDaniel died at age 57 on October 26, 1952, of breast cancer in the hospital on the grounds of the Motion Picture House in Woodland Hills. McDaniel was survived by her brother, Sam McDaniel. Thousands of mourners turned out to celebrate her life and achievements. In her will, McDaniel wrote, I desire a white casket and a white shroud, white gardenias in my hair and in my hands, together with a white gardenia blanket and a pillow of red roses. I also wish to be buried in the Hollywood Cemetery. The Hollywood Cemetery on Santa Monica Boulevard in Hollywood is the resting place of movie stars such as Douglas Fairbanks, Rudolph Valentino, and others. Hollywood Cemetery refused to allow her to be buried there, because it, too, practiced racial segregation and would not accept for burial the bodies of black people. Her second choice was Angelus Rosedale Cemetery, where she lies today. In 1999, Tyler Cassidy, the new owner of the Hollywood Cemetery that had renamed it Hollywood Forever Cemetery, offered to have McDaniel reinterred at his cemetery. Her family did not wish to disturb her remains and declined the offer. Instead, Hollywood Forever Cemetery built a large cenotaph on the lawn overlooking its lake. It is one of Hollywood's most popular tourist attractions. McDaniel's last will and testament of December 1951 awarded her Oscar to Howard University, where she had been honored by the students with a luncheon after she had won her Oscar. At the time of her death, McDaniel would have had few options. Very few white institutions in that day preserved black history. Historically, black colleges had been where such artifacts were placed. Despite evidence McDaniel had earned an excellent income as an actor, her final estate was less than $10,000. The IRS claimed the estate owed more than $11,000 in taxes. In the end, the probate court ordered all of her property, including her Oscar, sold to pay off creditors. Years later, the Oscar turned up where McDaniel wanted it to be, Howard University, where, according to reports, it was displayed in a glass case in the university's drama department. Whereabouts of the McDaniel Oscar. The whereabouts of the McDaniel Oscar are currently unknown. In 1992, Jet magazine ran a story reporting that Howard University could not find it and alleged that it had disappeared in the 1960s during the protests. In 1998, Howard University stated that it could find no written record of the Oscar having arrived at Howard. In 2007, an article in the Huffington Post repeated rumors that the Oscar had been cast into the Potomac River by angry civil rights protesters in the 1960s. The assertion reappeared in the Huffington Post under the same byline in 2009. In 2010, attention focused on the McDaniel Oscar again. In her acceptance speech, Best Supporting Actress winner Monique paid tribute to McDaniel, thanking her for enduring all that she had to so that I would not have to, and wearing a blue dress with gardenias in her hair similar to the one McDaniel had worn to the ceremony in 1940. In 2011, J. Freedom Delac of the Washington Post again reported that the plaque had disappeared during the 60s. In November 2011, Professor W. B. Carter of the George Washington University Law School published the results of her year-and-a-half-long investigation into the Oscars' fate. Professor Carter rejected claims that students had stolen the Oscar or thrown it in the Potomac River as wild speculation or pure fabrication that traded on long-perpetuated stereotypes of blacks. She questioned the sourcing of the Huffington Post stories. Instead, she argued that the Oscar was likely returned to Howard University's Channing Pollack Theater collection between the spring of 1971 and the summer of 1973 or had possibly been boxed and stored in the drama department at that time. The reason for its removal, she argued, was not civil rights unrest but rather efforts to make room for a new generation of black performers. If neither the Oscar nor any paper trail of its ultimate destiny can be found at Howard today, she suggested, inadequate storage or record keeping in a time of financial constraints and national turbulence may be blamed. She also suggested that a new generation of caretakers may have failed to realize the historic significance of the 5.5x6 plaque. Legacy and recognition. McDaniel has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Hollywood, one at 6,933 Hollywood Boulevard for her contributions to radio and one at 1719 Vine Street for motion pictures. In 1975, she was inducted posthumously into the Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame. In 1994, actress and singer Carla Burns launched her one-woman show, Hi Hat Hattie, written by Larry Parr, about McDaniel's life. Burns went on to perform perform the role in several other cities through 2002, including off-Broadway and the Long Beach Playhouse Studio Theater in California. Since 2007, actress and singer Vicalyn Reynolds has been portraying Hattie McDaniel on stage in the musical, Hattie, What I Need You to Know. Reynolds not only wrote the play, but also composed 10 of the 12 songs. The other 2 songs were composed by W.C. Handy, St. Louis Blues, and Charlie Chaplin, Smile. She most recently performed the musical at UCLA's Schoenberg Hall on March 20-22, 2015 under the direction of Byron Nora. Hattie McDaniel's great-grandnephew, actor and producer Kevin John Goff, was in attendance for all the performances and gave a moving speech praising Reynolds' performance. Ms. Reynolds' talent is without question, stated Goff as he addressed an astounded audience. Hattie passed away before I was born, and seeing Vicalyn perform was like meeting Hattie in person for the very first time. She is brilliant as Hattie, and she was born to play my aunt on stage and in film. In 2002, Hattie McDaniel's legacy was celebrated in American movie classics as AMC film Beyond Terra, The Extraordinary Life of Hattie McDaniel, 2001, produced and directed by Madison D. Lacey, Ph.D., and hosted by Whoopi Goldberg. This one-hour special depicted McDaniel's struggles and triumphs in the presence of rampant racism and brutal adversity. The film won the 2001-2002 Daytime Emmy Award, presented on May 17, 2002, for Outstanding Special Class Special. McDaniel was the 29th inductee in the Black Heritage Series by the United States Postal Service. Her 39-cent stamp was released on January 29, 2006, featuring a 1941 photograph of McDaniel in the dress she wore to accept the Academy Award in 1940. The ceremony took place at the Margaret Herrick Library of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, where the Hattie McDaniel collection includes photographs of McDaniel and other family members as well as scripts and other documents. American rapper Nas pays tribute to McDaniel in his song, Blunt Ashes, from his 8th studio album, released December 15, 2006. Hattie McDaniel Day was celebrated August 16, 2011, by the national GLBT radio station OUTQ, Sirius XM, on The Frank DeCaro Show. Kevin John Goff, McDaniel's great-grandnephew, is currently in pre-production on a 3-part documentary on McDaniel's life. Part 1 will be completed in September 2015 and filmed in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. Filmography features The Golden West, 1932, Lovebound, 1932, Impatient Maiden, 1932, Are You Listening, 1932, The Washington Masquerade, 1932, The Boiling Point, 1932, Crooner, 1932, Blonde Venus, 1932, Hypnotized, 1932, Hello, Sister, 1933, I'm No Angel, 1933, Merry Wives of Reno, 1934, Operator 13, 1934, King Kelly of the U.S.A., 1934, Judge Priest, 1934, Flirtation, 1934, Lost in the Stratosphere, 1934, Babbitt, 1934, Little Men, 1934, The Little Colonel, 1935, Transient Lady, 1935, Traveling Sales Lady, 1935, China Seas, 1935, Alice Adams, 1935, Murder by Television, 1935, Harmony Lane, 1935, Music is Magic, 1935, Another Face, 1935, We're Only Human, 1935, Can This Be Dixie, 1936, Next Time We Love, 1936, The First Baby, 1936, The Singing Kid, 1936, Gentle Julia, 1936, Showboat, 1936, High Tension, 1936, The Bride Walks Out, 1936, Postal Inspector, 1936, Star for a Night, 1936, Valiant is the Word for Carrie, 1936, Libeled Lady, 1936, Reunion, 1936, Mississippi Moods, 1937, Racing Lady, 1937, Don't Tell the Wife, 1937, The Crime Nobody Saw, 1937, The Wildcatter, 1937, Saratoga, 1937, Stella Dallas, 1937, Skyrocket, 1937, Over the Goal, 1937, Merry-Go-Round of 1938, 1937, Nothing Sacred, 1937, 45 Fathers, 1937, Quick Money, 1937, True Confession, 1937, Battle of Broadway, 1938, Vivacious Lady, 1938, The Shop-Worn Angel, 1938, Carefree, 1938, The Mad Miss Manton, 1938, The Shining Hour, 1938, Everybody's Baby, 1939, Zenobia, 1939, Gone with the Wind, 1939, Mary Maryland, 1940. The Great Lie, 1941. Affectionately Yours, 1941. They Died with Their Boots On, 1941. The Male Animal, 1942. In This Our Life, 1942. George Washington Slept Here, 1942. Johnny Come Lately, 1943. Thank Your Lucky Stars, 1943. Since You Went Away, 1944. Janie, 1944. Three is a Family, 1944. Hi, Beautiful, 1944. Janie Gets Married, 1946. Margie, 1946. Never Say Goodbye, 1946. Song of the South, 1946. The Flame, 1947. Mickey, 1948. Family Honeymoon, 1949. The Big Wheel, 1949. Short Subjects, Mickey's Rescue, 1934. Fate's Fathead, 1934. The Chases of Pimple Street, 1934. Anniversary Trouble, 1935. OK Toots, 1935. Wigwag, 1935. The Four-Star Border, 1935. Arbor Day, 1936. Termites of 1938, 1938. Radio Operances,